administrative and process information. So as you can see, we've started recording this session. We will upload it on our Women for Global Fund site. So you can share it widely. If you object to the, you can Okay, thank you for that, everyone. As I was saying just before we got interrupted, a few administrative processes is that for our French-speaking colleagues, we have interpretation. So if you go at the bottom of your screen, you will see an option for interpretation, and you can join the French session. And just to welcome everyone to our first of actually a series of webinars that we will be hosting together with colleagues from the Global Network Advocacy, Asia Pacific, GFAN Asia Pacific and Africa, and the Global Fund Secretariat, just to be discussing the importance of women and girls being involved in the seventh replenishment process for the Global Fund. This is particularly important because where most of us who are joining here today are actually residing and coming from countries and actually affected or infected by the three diseases that the Global Fund is actually focusing on: HIV, TB, and malaria. So it's important that we really put our efforts in engaging and advocating for funds that will basically make the new Global Fund strategy from 2023 a reality and to be realized in our respective countries. So as I mentioned, that this is the first of 3 webinars. We will be hosting the second on the 14th of June, which will basically be an update on how we're doing in terms of the pledges. And then also the third one on the 16th of August, which will be just 1 month shy of the actual replenishment pledging conference. So all of these details are available on our Women for Global Fund site, together with info notes, both available in French and English, that Sophie will put a link on the chat box, where you can basically just go to the info notes and learn a bit more about the 7th replenishment. And then lastly, as part of our processes and engagement opportunities, we have a media training that will be held on the 23rd, the 24th, and the 26th of May, which will basically be supporting women and collaborators on how to better engage and effectively do so through different and various platforms and opportunities. So all of these information will be made available to you. Some of you have already received invites already. So right now, I will just share the agenda to speak a bit about what our day looks like, or the few minutes that we have together, and then we will start the discussion. I had just noted, Sophie, if you're monitoring the participants, that I had noted someone also who may not need to be admitted. So just keeping your eyes and dollar on that. Thank you. So now to just focus on the agenda for today. As I mentioned, we have some colleagues online with us today from the Global Fund Secretariat. We have Claudia, who will be basically giving us a one-on-one or an overview about the replenishment, what it is about. And then we also have colleagues from GFAN. So we have Quentin, who will give us an update on a more global scale. And then we also have Rachel, who will give us an update on overview over what's happening or the approaches that are being taken by colleagues in the Asia Pacific region. And then we also have Rosemary, who will then do the same in terms of updates and efforts from GFAN Africa. And on the side of Women for Global Fund, I have online my colleagues, Sophie, who will be giving closing remarks, but also assisting us in monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, we are noting that there's never really enough time to go through all questions and inputs. So you can just go to our chat and type in your question or a comment. And then when we have time to basically break for discussions and to take questions, we'll refer to your inputs in the chat group. Without much further ado, I would like to hand over to Rachel just to check if, Claudia, we will be starting with you. I believe you will be, would you be making the presentation on, sharing the screen on your end, or should we do it from our end?
If you can do it, Fezile.
Okay, all right,
Thank
sure.
you.
That's fine. So I'll just share your presentation, but ask you to just start off by introducing yourself, who you are, and then get on with your session.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Ahumada. I work for the Global Fund as the manager for political and civil society advocacy. And what that means, especially for this year, is that my main responsibility is to ensure that as civil society and communities, you have the information and the tools that you need to meaningfully engage in the replenishment process. So we're going to hear a lot about the replenishment, not only in this webinar, in the media training that Fezile has referred to, but also throughout the coming months. So what I'm going to do today is just talk you through what the replenishment actually is, and then what the investment case is, because this is really a key tool when it comes to the replenishment. So if you can take us into the next slide, Fezile. Fezile, can you change the slides? Thank you. Okay. So here are the three things I'm going to talk you through, and then there are more colleagues from the GFAN family that will provide you with examples of that advocacy that is ongoing. But what I want to discuss with you today is what the replenishment is, what the investment case is, and the key messages included, and then some of the replenishment milestones or key events that are coming up. Next slide, please. Okay, so the replenishment is really just the word to describe the 3-year fundraising cycle of the Global Fund. So the Global Fund raises money to the responses to HIV, TB, and malaria, and within that, health systems and community systems strengthening every 3 years. This is the 7th time that we've done that, which is why we refer to this as the 7th replenishment cycle. In terms of the targets for raising funds, the majority of it comes from donor governments, typically up to 92%. And the remaining 8% is brought in from private sector, foundation, and to a lesser extent, innovative financing initiatives. Next slide, please. Now, the key tool that we use for the replenishments to essentially raise funds is what we call the investment case. And the investment case is essentially a paper, a document that argues why the Global Fund needs these funds and what will be achieved with it. The current investment case is based on the new strategy of the Global Fund, which has some ambitions and some targets that are new and I would say stronger than ever before, particularly when it comes to issues of recognizing the leadership of communities and advancing human rights and gender equality. The investment case also describes the amount of money that the Global Fund partnership needs to get back on track on the response to HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And the number that it sets out this time is at least 18 billion. And what that means is that we need to secure at least 18 billion in donor pledges between now and September. Next slide, please. So how do we get to that 18 billion? Essentially, it is based on the best modeling made by our technical partners and experts that set out for each of the 3 diseases what the financial needs are. Next slide. So the Global Fund needs at least 18 billion, and at least is very important because this is the minimum. It honestly is. It's the minimum that we need to get back on track on the responses to HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. This means that we essentially have given up on reaching the global targets around the 3 diseases. Next. So the at least 18 billion will enable us to save 20 million more lives, reducing the mortality rate by 64%. It will also allow us to prevent new infections up to 450 million, reduce annual deaths significantly as well. And then importantly, it will also help us improve life expectancy. And this is something that the Global Fund has measured for the first time, because we know that the life expectancy, so essentially how long a person can expect to live, is different depending on the part of the world where you happen to live. And the difference in that life expectancy is due to a series of inequalities and lack of opportunities. So what we did here was we measured, if we get back on track with responding to HIV, TB, and malaria, will that have an impact on how long people can live at large throughout different countries? And we were able to determine that yes, people would live up to 9% longer. So that's quite significant. Next slide. So beyond these numbers of how many lives we save, how many deaths we avert, we want to also be very clear that with those at least 18 billion, you're essentially providing the funds, the resources that we need to reach specific communities and to have you in the lead. So I have one example here around the work with adolescent girls and young women, which I know many of you are in the lead for in your respective countries. And we've seen that a substantial amount of this would be able to go to support, for example, peer educators at the local level, to support other work that is key to adolescent girls and young women, including things like comprehensive sexuality education, including also initiatives that seek to provide sexual and reproductive health services to young people. Next slide. We also see raising these at least 18 billion as key to fighting human rights violations and overcoming gender barriers. And there are a number of ways in which the Global Fund supports this. Everything from channeling resources directly to most affected communities, including young women, including transgender communities and other key populations. And then we also have a series of human rights key steps that we ask donor governments that are supported by the Global Fund to take. So raising at least 18 billion will enable us to, one, sustain these efforts, but then also to upscale them. Fezile and Sophie, I just see a note that the interpretation isn't working.
De voir une note qui m'indique que l'interprétation ne fonctionne pas.
Can I ask for the next slide, Fezile? Thank you. Okay, so I've said already that we need at least 18 billion. And this slide essentially illustrates why that's the minimum.
Illustre.
The little red pillar that you see at one edge of the slide is the 18 billion. That is what has historically been the Global Fund contribution, or our share, to the response to the 3 diseases. We have maintained the share, so we would still contribute 14% of the global response, but to maintain, because the needs have gone greater, we have still increased by 30% what we need to raise. So 18 billion is 30% more funds than the Global Fund Partnership has ever raised. We are also, and this is the next pillar, the 58 billion, foreseen that we need a 30% increase in domestic resources. This is how much money governments in each of your countries dedicate to domestic health, to health system strengthening, to covering needs within the country. Additional funders that comes from other sectors, that is up to 19%. And you'll see that with these red pillars and the 2 sort of
Nous avons également des fonds additionnels.
Have a gray column. That's a gap. That gap is 22%, that essentially we do not know where that money would come from. It is unfunded. So this is why when we talk about at least 18 billion for the Global Fund,
nous avons également 25,2%.
Next slide.
Alors, cette agence.
Work streams will start. Well, they have kind of already started, but they'll start very soon. And that work will be ongoing, probably here bi-weekly.
Maybe someone can mute, please. Merci. Je profite pour la traduction. Tu dois toucher le bouton qui dit interprétation et choisir ton langue. Okay. We're having some challenges. Okay, we're having some challenges with interpretation.
Okay, just to say, Sophie is on it.
Okay.
Yeah, if our colleagues could just give us
I'm trying to figure
Okay.
out, I'm trying to see where the interpreter is. She's gone quiet, so I'm doing my best here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the return on investment is essentially just a fancy term for saying the benefit of investing in something. And for every $1 invested in the fight to HIV, TB, and malaria, you get a return of $31, which is huge. It's like saying you give 1 and then you get 30 back. It's the highest return of investment we've ever seen. And it is essentially because of the backtracking that we saw with COVID. So the stakes are so high, which also makes the investment that much.
Nous avons rencontré avec la crise du COVID.
Next.
Prochaine diapo, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. Oh, one before, please. Yes, thank you. Okay, so then you know what the replenishment is now. Essentially, how do you raise the funds for the Global Fund? Then the investment case is your advocacy tool, the document that says why we need these funds. Now, the next question is, how do you actually take your messaging on the investment case? Where do you use it? And what you see on this slide is the key milestones or the events that are coming up where we invite you to share the needs for the Global Fund replenishment and work with other partners. So I'm going to start from May because the others have passed, but there's some really key events coming up, including next week, the World Health Assembly. Then we have also the World Economic Forum, which is a coming together of mainly private sector and high net worth individuals. And then moving forward, there are more events such as the G7 Summit, the AIDS Conference in Montreal, up until the General Assembly of the United Nations in September. Essentially, the months that we invite you to advocate throughout is up until September, because the replenishment process comes to an end, so to speak, in September, when we will have what we call the pledging conference. And that's where stakeholders announce. Okay. There are, in addition to each of these moments, which are global or regional, a number of opportunities at the local level, so in each of your countries, to advocate. And these include things like writing to your embassies, writing to your leaders, and I know that our colleagues from GFAN will give you some more examples and ideas around that. Next slide. Okay, so this is my last slide, but I do want to encourage you all to, after the webinar, to click on the links that are embedded below. We'll send the presentation out because we have a nice summary of the investment case, which provides you with everything you need to know about it. And then we also have a series of social media messages that you can take, use yourselves, make them your own, and make them amplified across your partners. I see some questions starting to pop up in the chat already, so I'm going to stop here. I think we have some time for questions with Fezile, and then we'll hear from our colleagues from GFAN. Thank you. Over to you, Fezile.
Thanks so much, Claudia, for that. I think, Sophie, if you're ready with questions on the chat, should we maybe start with those and then also just get a round of hands from colleagues online? If you can just raise your hand and then we will note you for questions. Ndolo also asking you to be on standby to support Sophie with just monitoring our guests, just to manage again the intrusion. Sophie, over to you. Questions on chat?
Thanks, Fezile. So Claudia, it looks like there's just one that's coming up around the 30% for domestic resource mobilization in relation to what? What is that 30%? If you could just go back to that 30% that you were talking about and just expand on that a little bit more. And then there's another one, how much of the previous 14 billion pledge was actually honored? So how many countries have not actually paid what they said they were going to pay in the previous, from the 6th replenishment, so in the current cycle that we're in? Those are two questions for you.
Thank you, Sophie. So for the first question on domestic resource mobilization, I see Quentin has answered, and he's right. It's compared to the amount that was pledged for the 6th replenishment. So I think the important point to note for domestic resource mobilization is that it is another area where we really need support, because the global events that I've showed you on the key milestones page is where we get the pledges for the Global Fund work. But if we raise at least 18 billion for the Global Funds partnership, and we do not succeed in increasing domestic resource mobilization, health investment, then we're not going to succeed in getting back on track. So they really go hand on hand. And we have, again, some key messaging that we can share around domestic investment. And particularly when it comes to the African region, we are seeing just amazing mobilization from partners, including GFAN Africa and others, where they are reaching out to their leaders in countries and making the case for increased domestic investment. What we have seen typically from what the Global Fund calls implementing countries, so the countries that implement the Global Fund programs, is that while they are not typically in a position to pledge to the Global Fund directly, what they can do is invest in their own domestic health systems. And that already is tremendous. Then the other question from Nana around how much of the previous 14 billion pledge was honored, we're still seeing. Typically, donors pledge at the replenishment conference or the months before, and then there is a timeline agreed with each of them. Many of those timelines extend right until the next replenishment. So the good news is that we are on track in terms of getting in everything that was pledged last time, but we're not going to know until the next few months whether absolutely all of it is honored. What we're seeing though is quite positive, I would say, with one or two exceptions. I don't see more questions in the chat. I wonder if there are any hands.
I'm also not noting any hands. Sophie, please confirm if there are any hands.
No, nothing. I think you can carry on.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Claudia. But I'm sure, we may have additional questions and and inputs at the end, because we will have also another time or slot for discussions. Right now, I would like to hand over to Quentin. Quentin, would you like me to also share your slide from my end, or would you be managing it?
No, if it's okay, I wouldn't mind sharing it myself.
Okay, all right, perfect. So go ahead, just introduce yourself and then get started. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone, give me a second to put that up. So hi everyone, my name is Quentin. I work for the Global Fund Advocates Network, or GFAN for short. So it'll be a short presentation. I want to cover who we are, what we do, and how you can engage with our work. So I want to thank Claudia for really doing a good job setting up the stage, and had to edit my presentation on the go to remove a few things. So first, who we are. So we're a network of health advocates. We're created in 2012, and we have, as of the last count, which was last year, 700 plus members. But it's being managed through a small secretariat team that is based in Canada. It's two of my colleagues, including a director, Katie, and myself, based in Fiji. So of course, because we're such a small secretariat, we don't daily engage with every single one of our 700 members. There's a core group of a few dozen with whom we're in touch, with whom we are regularly in touch, and the others mostly receive information from us. At times reach out for help, etc. And the core of our work is really to coordinate that network, that network of organizations, and help them do their work better. Sorry, it's not jumping. Yeah, good. So this is to give you an overview of what our work looks like. So we organize our work around 5 pillars. So first pillar is to track and translate the field. And essentially that means that we try to take technical information that comes from large institutions, mostly the Global Fund, but also the Stop TB Partnership, the RB.
Sur le terrain, nous travaillons de façon bi-hebdomadaire. Nous travaillons également avec l'ONU et l'OMS.
To make it more practically useful and more directly usable for broader diversity of people, in particular for members who work on the field. So we do that through regular GFAN calls, and I'll explain in a second how you can join us on those.
Régulier, et nous avons également mis sur pied un grand nombre de documents et Le deuxième pilier de notre travail est d'amplifier et des messages et des campagnes de plaidoyer. Nous avons une plateforme constituée de plus de 765 membres et nous essayons de nous aider mutuellement afin de faire en sorte que leur message soit entendu et nous essayons enfin d'amplifier les messages spécifiques afin de donner un accès à notre plateforme et de nous assurer que nos messages
third pillar is to support sustain global and country level advocacy for resource mobilization.
Effectivement. Et arrive, nous travaillons également avec, pour soutenir certains pays. Nous travaillons en réseau, c'est un réseau de membres.
Because it happens every 3 years, it used to be that people.
Et nous travaillons toutes les 3 années, nous rencontrons pour remettre sur pied nos plans de plaidoyer et essayer un peu de changer notre ordre du jour. Et nous travaillons pour nous assurer que entre les sessions, entre les différentes reconstitutions, nous continuons à travailler et que cela soit facile et que notre travail ait une résonance.
You might know that a certain type of people tend to have better access to the rooms where decisions are being made.
En ce qui concerne le plaidoyer et la participation inclusive.
Some of the tools we use are a GFAN speaker program. It's a mentorship program for members of communities that have directly been helped by the Global Fund. We provide them with mentorship, with training, and we give them access to spaces where they can, carry their voice, carry messages, their story, and to help make sure that you can't hold a meeting on, on HIV, TB, or malaria, and don't have anyone in the room that actually represents the communities that are directly affected. And finally, support a connected and aligned global advocacy network. That again is really the core of our work. The idea is that when governments turn to civil society, we think it's important that instead of hearing a million voices saying a million different things, they would hear the same points repeated, and that would be amplified through consensus. And so the idea is that we try to create the spaces for that consensus among civil society to be built. And so we have regular meetings, regular calls, regular conversations around a diversity of topics to try to identify what other things we agree on and how we can best pass on that message to the people we target with our advocacy. So this is, I'm going to pop a few links in the chat. Sorry. So now we have a large part of our work is to create resources for people to better engage with Global Fund work. So I'll go through a number of the key resources that we've produced for the 7th replenishment and how we think they can be most useful to you. So every replenishment, as Claudia explained, the Global Fund releases an investment case, and in particular that contains an ask, which as she explained this time around is a minimum of 18 billion, which is their financial target for the 7th replenishment. Ahead of the investment case, we using the same data, almost the same data, the TB data was a bit different. We produced a civil society investment case with a different ask because we don't actually think that 18 billion is enough. And so we've been pushing for 24 billion to be the target for HIV, AIDS, TB, and malaria. And on top of that, 4.5 billion for community-led responses. So that covers essentially COVID and future pandemics. But I'm not going to spend too much time on these numbers, but the report we produced where we put these numbers, I think is interesting to read if you want to get an idea of civil society perspective on this replenishment campaign. On top of that document, which is fairly short and easy to read, We made a number of thematic briefs. We made 6 in total. One on HIV/AIDS, one on TB, one on malaria, one on harm reduction, one on domestic financing, which is Global Fund lingo for the money that is being spent directly by government on HIV/AIDS and malaria, and one on the private sector. So each of these thematic briefs are complements to the broader report, and they're a way to explore these specific topics. They have up-to-date statistics, key talking points, and a number of references that you can then read if you want to explore a topic more. And they're again short and easy to read. We also did a lot of work around the Global Fund new strategy. We have regular updates on our website and on social media. I want to highlight that the new strategy that is being developed by the Global Fund is a crucial document. Over the next 5 years, this is going to guide how billions of dollars are going to be invested to fight against 3 diseases that are, that are killing millions. As Claudia said, the Global Fund is expecting to be able to save 20 million people in the next 3 years. So what will go into that strategy is very important, but also very technical. The document that was produced by the Global Fund, which is the strategy framework, it's a long narrative, and so we're working to try to make it easier to use and more and easier to understand. And finally, we released the pledge tracker, which has up-to-date information of what government have pledged how much and how far are we from our target. So all these documents, you can find the links in the chat. And I'll just show you what the pledge tracker looks like. Oh, sorry, let's skip way ahead. So this is our pledge tracker. So I mean, it's a very simple graph. On the left, you have what has been pledged for the 7th replenishment. You can see that so far only the United States is on the tracker. They haven't exactly made a pledge, but they've announced that they would contribute up to 6 billion, which is a third of what we need, which is great. But it also means that we need to find 12 billion more. And so far, no other country has really made clear announcements on how much they want to commit. So we're still quite far from the 18 billion target. And as we said, we don't actually think 18 billion is enough. We think 24 billion is probably enough to end HIV, TB, malaria as epidemics by 2030, which is our global target. And so there's quite a bit of work to be done. Here on the right, you can also see who pledged how much during the last replenishment. And you can see that the United States was already the largest donor then, followed by the United Kingdom and France. Background noise. So some of the key messages that we're pushing during this replenishment campaign. The first one is that we're separate from the Global Fund. We don't work for the Global Fund, so we can at times be critical of the organization. But we cannot stress enough how much investing in the Global Fund can achieve significant and important gains. Again, we're talking about millions of people who wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the Global Fund. And this will still be the case for the next funding cycle, the next 3 years. But at the same time, 18 billion really is only the bare minimum needed to implement the Global Fund's new strategy. The strategy is so far very ambitious, but there will be a need for a lot more fund if we want to realize all of its objectives. And more importantly, more worryingly for us, that number of 18 billion assumes a gap that in the Global Fund's own model is not going to be funded. And we think that gap shouldn't be there. And on top of that, the numbers for domestic resource mobilization. So again, that's how much money are going to be spent not through the Global Fund, but by the countries themselves on HIV, AIDS, TB, and malaria. The numbers that are being used in the investment case are, we think, quite optimistic, especially considering the context now of the war in Ukraine and the growing debt burdens of a number of countries after the COVID crisis. And so we think that there will be even more need than what has been projected, and so that the gap is going to be even larger. So that's why it's particularly important to make sure that this replenishment campaign is more than successful and we go beyond the 18 billion. So now, how to engage. Listing a number of countries there. Some countries that we have a sense that they might make pledges that are aligned with the 18 billion. Canada is one. I've put France in there because we haven't heard too many bad things about them. But mostly we've heard of worrying signals. And again, it's because of the context of ongoing COVID crisis, the war in Ukraine. There's a lot of competing priorities. And so a number of countries are sending signals that might suggest that they might not want to increase their contribution enough to reach the 18 billion target. I'm highlighting the UK, Germany, and Sweden in particular, because they are countries that specifically talk about gender issues as being a priority for them in the way they will allocate aid money. And so it's particularly relevant, I think, to highlight when communicating with people, with representatives from those countries, that fighting against HIV, AIDS, TB, and malaria is addressing gender issues. That young women and girls in all the diversity really benefit from this disease being ended as epidemics by 2030. So a few more things I want to say. I'm going to put links in the chat again. Is that you can join our calls and keep in touch with us by getting on our listserv. That's the tool we use to share our emails. I've put the link on how to join our network in the chat. That's all you need to do to get all of our emails, access to all our calls, and generally just make use of us, reach out to us, and make sure we can help you do your work better. You can also follow us on social media. We're Global Fund Advocates Network on Facebook and at GFAN Advocates on Twitter. We're mostly active on Twitter, though we also post on Facebook. We will be at the International AIDS Conference in Montreal this summer, and if any of you are joining, we'll have a networking zone, and you're more than welcome to come meet us. And finally, currently, we have an open letter to the German Chancellor, which is still open for support. There is a link again that you find in the chat where you can read the letter, essentially calling for Germany to not to cut into its said budget and not to cut into its contribution to the Global Fund. So if you think your organization would be willing to support it, consider reading and signing it. And with this, that's it for me. And I'll take any questions.
Thanks so much, Quentin. I have not noted any questions in the chat. So Sophie Ondolo, do we have any questions on the chat for Quentin?
No, I don't think so at this point, but I do think we should keep going with the presentation.
On ne peut pas parler directement ou bien sauf dans la...
To question at the end.
All right. Okay. Yes. And just to alert everyone that we are aware of the time, but considering the glitches we had at the beginning, and also just generally that these are important discussions, and especially for a first webinar, we would appreciate and ask you to bear with us just to continue. So I'll ask next Rachel. Rachel, would you like to, I think you can project, you had mentioned from your end, and then after Rachel, if we can just go straight to Rosemary, and then we'll take the last rounds of questions. Rachel, are you ready?
Fezile, I'd need to have access to sharing screen. I don't have that yet.
Okay, I believe we can. Sophie, are you able to just facilitate that?
Thank you, got it. Thank you, Sophie.
I thought I'd done it already. Sorry.
No worries, thank you. So just a kind reminder for people, I see a hand raised. Fezile, I'm not sure what to do with that.
So if I may just ask the person who has their hand up to just note your comment in the comment section. We will take it after Rachel and Rosemary. Thank you.
Sure, can I just check if the full screen is up? I can't tell because I'm sharing my screen.
We can see it, Rachel.
Great, thank you so much. So hi everyone, and I apologize first for the translators. I do have a reputation for speaking too quickly, so please do let me know if I'm speaking too quickly for translations. So hi everyone, my name is Rachel Ong. I'm the Regional Coordinator for Global Fund Advocates Network Asia Pacific. We're a partner and part of the family of GFAN, and I'm based in Singapore. So I'll move very quickly given the fact that I understand we're slightly behind time. Just to talk a little bit about the campaign. So I think Claudia has already provided an overview about the work and what the replenishment is about. Quentin has provided some background information about the work broadly about GFAN, and I suppose GFAN exists, including for Asia Pacific and Africa, to support the mobilization of the Global Fund. But more specifically, GFAN Asia Pacific is an advocacy platform of HIV, TB, and malaria advocates, community and civil society in the Asia Pacific region, and we support advocacy for a fully resourced Global Fund, for increased and sustainable domestic resource mobilization for health and equitable, people-centered, human rights-based and gender transformative inclusion of HIV, TB, and malaria responses within universal health coverage. So the campaign that we led this year with all the support from GFAN as well as GFAN Africa and CS for Me, was following the Love More, Give More campaign that was held in 2019, which was conceptualized by GFAN Asia Pacific at one of the pre-meetings prior to the preparatory meeting hosted by the government of India in 2019.
Nous avons organisé des réunions avec notre gouvernement
in extraordinary times, the power of more is to demonstrate the resilience of communities and civil society despite COVID-19. And we wanted to emphasize the importance of the Global Fund partnership and what it means for us to be in solidarity together, and so that we are able to achieve more together. So before I go into more details of the campaign, I'm just slightly going to shift the sequence slightly, and I'm just going to show a video that we produced for the launch of the campaign, just to give you an idea around the key messages that we've had so far for the campaign.
I am living with HIV. I survived malaria and I survived TB. The Global Fund has kept me alive in Papua New Guinea. It funds not only tests and treatment for HIV, TB, and malaria. Its funding strengthens health and community systems, combats stigma and discrimination, and promotes and protects human rights and gender equality. HIV, TB, and malaria responses have been off track to achieve the 2030 targets, even before COVID-19 struck. If we continue this way, we will not see the end of the three diseases as epidemics by 2030. It is time we action our commitments.
Key and vulnerable populations are facing grave human rights violations across many countries in our region. Most often, these violations are sanctioned by the governments. I work with people who use drugs in the Philippines, and I am the Secretary of Network of Asia People Who Use Drugs. Every day, I am witnessing and experience firsthand the cause and impact of human rights violation on communities and on the HIV response. Unless we invest in and accelerate towards right-based, people-centered, and gender-transformative policy environment, we will not end the three diseases as epidemic nor achieve universal health care. It is time that we push back stronger, we push back together.
As a young trans woman in Pakistan, I saw how fragile health systems struggled in the wake of COVID-19. In that struggle, we, key population, the poor, the marginalized, the vulnerable were left behind. At the same time, we, the communities, civil societies, proved the importance of community system and made sure that our communities had access to HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria services and other needs during lockdowns. This was possible with the support from the Global Fund. We are ready to bounce back stronger and better than before, but we don't do this alone. We want everyone, donor, government, and communities to come together because we are better together.
We are at an extraordinary and critical moment in our fight against the three diseases. COVID-19 faced an unprecedented level of burden on health systems across the world. The Global Fund reacted decisively and supported countries with close to $4.1 billion to fight COVID-19 and protect progress against the three diseases. We need to ensure sustainable financing for the three diseases and for universal health coverage, strengthen public-private partnerships to build back better, to build back stronger. If we are to end the three diseases as epidemics, we need the donors to step up their game. We need fully funded HIV, TB, and malaria responses. We need fully funded human rights responses. We need resilient and sustainable system for health. And for this to happen, we need a fully resourced global fund.
So and let me go back quickly to the PowerPoint presentation. Just to give you to continue the presentation around the campaign. So you'll see like origami paper cranes flying across the screen, which is one of the symbols for the campaign, which is is a very traditional Japanese handicraft, and it symbolizes success and good fortune, peace, love, and hope, and healing during challenging times. And for the Global Week of Action, we've also incorporated the African elephant, which symbolizes wisdom, strength, power, royalty, and moral and spiritual strength. So some of you have participated in this Global Week of Action, which was led by GFAN Asia Pacific and co-organized with our following partners, CS4Me, GFAN Africa, and the Global Fund Advocates Network. And this was actually supported by more than 55 partners globally. And we actually had a total of 347 organizations and partners from communities and civil society signing on to all the individual letters that were sent, delivered, or handed to donor government representatives in local embassies. So a total of 498 letters were sent, and there were 36 meetings with embassies and consulates that were actually organized. You would see that the following slides will give you a couple of ideas around the Global Week of Action that was held from the 7th to the 11th of March. And it still happened for a few weeks after that, as our colleagues were meeting with embassy representatives to talk about the importance of Global Fund in their countries. So here you see some of our colleagues in action from GFAN Africa and Nairobi. You would see that our colleagues in Sri Lanka also had meetings with virtually with donor representation because there was difficulties in having face-to-face meetings. we have colleagues in Indonesia bring the Global Week of Action to the C20 as part of the C20 kickoff meeting, which is one of the engagement groups of the G20 hosted by the Indonesian president this year. You see our colleagues in Nepal also gathering together to fold the cranes, and colleagues in Uganda getting together to prepare for the efforts that they were going to implement the following week. So we actually had a huge number of colleagues and civil society friends that joined us in this Global Week of Action that took place for the campaign effort itself, because it does go beyond the Global Week of Action. We've developed several materials which you can find on this website, and I'll share that link afterwards in the chat box. But we have social media toolkits, and you have email signatures. We've developed this sticker pack for social media communications, which you can see moving on the screen at this point. So it's a fun way of communicating with your friends and colleagues around in your daily lives, for example, and showing support for the Global Fund. We've developed Zoom backgrounds and other materials which you can find on the resources page. In terms of upcoming events or activities, we will be focusing on further embassy events that will be jointly co-organized by relevant donor embassies in several countries in this region, including Nepal, Indonesia, Singapore, India, and Vietnam, for example. We will be releasing a global sign-on, and it will not be the traditional sign-on methodology, which you just include your name and an organization, but it will be a 3D image of either selecting a crane or an origami elephant, which will be unique to every single individual. And hopefully we can develop non-fungible tokens from that. And we are hoping to create one big artwork that we will be able to share and present at the Replenishment Conference, for example. There will be also continued work with the C20 engagements and ensuring that the Global Fund replenishment is high on the G20 agenda. As the second push, we're actually looking to include more activities that will be targeted for specifically at donors that are not part of government, so private sector and private foundations, ultra high net worth individuals, for example, as part of this, and also continued push around the importance of domestic resource mobilization in countries to achieve UHC specifically for HIV, TB, and malaria. And we will be also producing a TB key messages and toolkit for communities and civil society and specific activities for International Youth Day. So for more information, please visit this website, and over to you, Fezile. I hope I've caught up on some time.
Brilliant, Rachel. Thank you so much for that. I think it was loud and clear. I'll ask Rosemary now to just jump on straight. Rosemary, are you ready?
Yes, Fezile, I'm ready. Just a minute. Very happy to be here. I'll just share my screen now. Just a minute. Okay,
go ahead. And just to remind everyone to feel free, just drop your comments and questions on the chat. Soon after Rosemary, we will be going to that. Thank you.
All right, so you can see my screen?
Yes, just waiting for you to just make it a full slideshow. There we go. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so thank you so much for this. It's great to be here and to hear so many great insights and updates from colleagues who have spoken before me. So I'm going to be presenting updates from GFAN Africa perspective. A lot has already been shared, and so I will touch on what is quite new. In terms of GFAN Africa, the Secretariat is hosted and coordinated by Waki Health. I am from Waki Health. I lead the team there. We do this in collaboration with GFAN Afrique Francophone, which is coordinated by Impact Santé Afrique. Many of you might already know our colleagues there, Olivia Ngo, who is a team leader there. Then in terms of how we organize and how we coordinate, we mostly engage on either the WhatsApp group or a listserv. So we have a listserv right now, which is an email list of colleagues who have signed up to the GFAN Africa mailing list right now with about 74 members. And then we have a WhatsApp group, which seems to be quite busy and sort of the preferred way of engaging, getting in touch and discussing and celebrating wins and work that we do, with about 332 members now. So this is just a background. I won't go to that, but just highlights what it is about women and girls and why we as a community of women and girls need to think about the Global Fund Replenishment as an opportunity or as an entry point that can help us to advocate for equity, for equality, and to really understand how HIV, TB, and malaria disproportionately affects women and girls. In terms from the GFAN Africa perspective, this year or this particular replenishment is quite pivotal for us, because for the first time you have African countries co-hosting the preparatory meeting of the Global Fund Replenishment, and beyond that, championing the replenishment. So just quick highlights of what has been happening at the country level and who you can connect with if you're from either of the 5 co-host countries. So in Kenya, in the lead up to the preparatory meeting, which was in March, there was some, was it in March or in February? Time is moving so fast. So at the national level, we had Africa, like civil society coming together to engage, to strategize, some media activities, MP engagement. And if you're here and you're from Kenya, the people to link up with for Global Fund Replenishment country level work, Faith Ndongo and Philip Nyakwana. These are our team leaders also at the Kenya coordinating mechanism, and are also championing the replenishment among communities and civil society. In Rwanda, again, civil society meeting, high level engagement, even with embassies, media and MP engagement. And if you're here and you're from Rwanda, the person to connect with there is Noliet Kabayana. Then in Senegal, similar activities actually for all the 5 co-host countries. The community and civil society activities were quite similar, just a few variations here and there. And the person to connect with, if you're here, you're from Senegal, is Olivia Go, because Impact Santa Africa is coordinating all the Francophone work. In South Africa, there were a couple of meetings as well, media, engaging the SANAC, Civil Society Forum. And actually in South Africa, if you're here from South Africa, the team that is leading this work is the team leaders from SANAC Civil Society Forum, specifically is Solin Duku and Steve Letsike. And then in DRC, again, similar work happening, and Olivia Ngo would be the person to connect. The key thing to note is that these meetings and the activities that happened in the lead up to the preparatory meeting paved the way for additional in-country work and engagement and activities. So there is still quite a bit of work that is happening there, because at each of these meetings, the in-country civil society and community team came up with a national level sort of strategy or plan for the replenishment, and you can get more of that in terms of details. There were also quite a number of regional activities that we supported and led, including youth engagement, parliamentarians roundtable. There were several of these, because with parliamentary engagement, it's a bit difficult to get all that you want at a go. So we did it in segments. So we would get like 5 or like 4, and we would work with the ones that we got. Then there was a civil society meeting in Nairobi. It was a hybrid regional meeting. During that meeting, we came up with the civil society key asks out of this Nairobi meeting. which were our asks for the preparatory meeting. And that also contributed to or provided input into the broader civil society outcome document that Quentin, I think, mentioned earlier on. With the Torch Caravan, this is an activity that GFAN Africa executed as a way to celebrate the Global Fund's 20th anniversary. That was last year, but it was also an entry point to begin to highlight the impact of the Global Fund in the region and to highlight the replenishment, basically. And so with the torch moving through 20 countries across Africa, it formed an entry point to activate voices, to activate the attention and highlight, shine a spotlight onto the Global Fund in terms of impact and pave the way for the replenishment. Then in terms, from a global point of view, Rachel did mention this already. It was a Global Week of Action with the GFAN family, where many colleagues, communities and civil society around the world came together, and quite a number of groups across the Africa region came together and joined in this global action as well. So moving forward, I know Claudia had shared the key moments, entry points for the replenishment, but from our region, we identified what the key moments where we would have an entry point or ability to influence. And so we identified World Malaria Day, and CS4Me was leading us on that, did quite a number of activities highlighting the replenishment. Then this month is the Africa month, May is the Africa month. And so already there are considerations for, what else we can do to utilize this to vocalize and get the voice heard from Africa on why we need to make sure that the replenishment is successful. Our World Health Assembly colleagues already mentioned that, but from an Africa point of view is to consider the delegations that are going to, participating or engaging. So World Health Assembly is here with us, but it has been an important key moment as colleagues prepared at the side sessions there. And of course, we will not be there, but many other colleagues will be there. In June, there is a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, which also coincides with the Malaria and NTDs Summit. There is an action here, and there is something you can do here, because the plan is to have a civil society side meeting and have even members of parliament in that meeting. And then we would have a civil society outcome document from that meeting for CHOGM, highlighting the Global Fund replenishment. Then in July, so that will be in Kigali. In July, there is the African Union Summit. What we know as of now is that it's going to be in Lusaka. The theme of the African Union Summit this year is around nutrition and food security. We do not anticipate discussions about the Global Fund, but we would like to utilize that moment to gather the attention and get the attention of African leaders onto the replenishment. And so making sure that there is a strong side meeting with strong civil society voice is the plan, being in Lusaka, engaging media, and utilizing that to make useful noise and do quite a bit of drum beats in there. In August, there is the TICAD, which is the Tokyo International Conference on Africa's Development. Basically, these are discussions between African governments and the government of Japan. And it happens every 3 years. And it's an important opportunity because all of our governments in Africa will be participating in this TICAD because they are looking at the teaming agreements, with the government of Japan in terms of development in Africa. And so it's critical that when they do those teaming agreements, or when they draw their priorities or the declaration, that declaration should highlight AIDS, TB, and malaria, should highlight the Global Fund. And we are also utilizing this opportunity to reach out to Japan as a donor to pledge to the Global Fund. So for this one, we are working with our colleagues in Japan, the Africa-Japan Forum team, to ensure that our advocacy and our messaging is quite aligned. The conference itself, or the meeting itself, will be in Tunisia in August, but there's a lot going on already in terms of providing the input and the language input. One of the things that we could do, or you could do, is to identify who the country delegation to TCAD is. It's normally led by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so if there are any connections you have, you could either connect with the GFAN Africa team in your country, or maybe if you have networks or you have influence at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that can also be a strategy of outreach. There's also the AIDS conference in Canada, and I know as GFAN family, we will have a networking zone, and we will also rally our voices and action to either reach out to donor countries. Then, of course, in September, there's a UN summit, and looking forward to then having the pledging conference right after that. So these are some of the key moments, within the region. There are 3 asks for each of these key moments. When we engage with the heads of state, or when we engage with any influential people at the country level, we are asking them for 3 things. One, we are asking them to make an early solidarity pledge to the Global Fund. The second thing we are asking them, especially if they are part of the 5 co-host countries, is to attend the pledge conference. The pledge conference, our understanding is that it's by invitation. And so then those invited, once we get to know, then this message would also be relevant. But for now, the countries that we are asking to attend are the 5 co-host countries. And the third message, when we interact and engage, we are asking them to increase domestic resources for health. So those are the 3 key asks we have for this. In terms of others, like I think I've spoken about these already, is to engage donor embassies and share impact stories. This is the Global Week of Action is an example of what can happen or what has happened before in terms of engaging donor embassies and combining that with impact stories, telling our stories of what the Global Fund means for us, the impact of the Global Fund. Here there's a link to some of the video impact stories that GFAN Africa has recorded, including some of the country briefs that help to describe what the Global Fund has meant in country A or country B. So far, we've only done for the 5 co-host countries, but that's something we are updating as we go. Also, media, of course, is quite powerful, and you can write open editorials. You can pen why the Global Fund is important and what it means for women and girls, and send to your editor. I think that would add a lot of value, especially to the messaging around ensuring that we meet the 18 billion US dollars, but also for domestic resource. Then engaging our country delegations to the key moments, do you know who from your country is going to the Kigali summit? Do you know who is your country delegation to the AU summit, to the TCAD, and so on and so forth, and engaging with them? You can find us on Twitter. You can follow us there, also on Facebook. In terms of contact from our end, here is an email address. You can either write to Sam, he's supporting and leading on the campaign work and communications piece. You can reach out to me, and if you're in Francophone, you can reach out to our colleague at ISA, Olivia. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rosemary, for that great presentation. Just to then quickly check, I've seen some of the comments on the chat box have been responded to. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing the links, and Sophie they asked. Sophie and Dolo, are there any questions or comments from the chat that I may have missed?
No, Faze, there's actually nothing now.
All right, okay. All right, colleagues online, I know we've
sorry,
run...
the question that just popped up.
Okay, all right, I'll get to you just now, Ndolo, but just to ask the colleagues online as well, just by a show of hands, if you have any quick questions as we try and wrap up. So you can just raise your hand, and then Ndolo, over to you with the question.
The question is actually from Nana Gleason, and she's asking who are the 5 co-host countries, and are there any template letters for the Japan embassy, for example?
All right, thanks for that, Nana. I think we can just ask maybe Rachel and Rosemary to respond to that. Yeah.
Sorry, Nana, can I just have a bit more clarity around the template letters? The 5 countries are actually in Sophie's chat. They're the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Rwanda, Senegal, and South Africa. So is there a little bit more of a context of what the question is on in terms of the template letters?
Hi, thanks, Rachel. So basically responding to, I think it was Rosemary's suggestion in terms of writing to embassies, et cetera, and particularly Japan, because they're hosting TICAD, for example. So I was just asking if there are any standard template letters that participants could use, for example, to write to the embassies around, you know, where we're headed, or the kind of asks that we would like them to consider when they have their conference. Thank you.
Sure, so maybe it might be helpful before Rosemary jumps in, is that I had a quick conversation with a colleague from Japan this morning, and that the ask for the Japanese government is 1.1 billion US dollars. The issue now, and not to overcomplicate the issues that we're having conversations about, is that the current budget for MOFA doesn't actually support this ask. So there are conversations ongoing within the upper house that will be happening later on in this month or next month on how to resolve this. The intention for the pledging might take place at the G7 summit, but if it does not, TCAD is definitely an opportunity for the pledging moment to take place. So I suppose that the conversation will have to happen with Rosemary around the organizing of African colleagues for the letters to be sent to the Japanese government in terms of that. But we'll be very happy to work with GFAN Africa, of course, in terms of developing these letters, as we're working closely with our colleagues in Japan around the organizing of and engagement of civil society. But what I understand is that there is not that much transparency in terms of the engagement of civil society and communities in some of the TCAT processes, traditionally and historically anyway. So it will be definitely a high-level event attended by ministers and of health and finance, for example, in Tunisia. But a lot of the participation for communities and civil society, for example, might only happen virtually. Over to you, Rosemary.
Yeah, Rachel, you're right on that. Sorry, my network is not very good. But in terms of the template and letters, we have always been referring back to the letters that were done and delivered during the Global Week of Action, because the letters are there for all the embassies, even the implementing countries that are also donors. So no need to duplicate more letters. And maybe Rachel, perhaps, you know, from your end, we can share the link to the letters or some guidance there. But yes, Nana, the letters actually exist. For the letters that are in view of TCAD, I think it's one of the areas where we could collaborate with GFAN AP, Women for Global Fund, GFAN Africa, CS for me, all of us as a community of advocates, because right now is a time to engage. And what the colleagues from Japan have been saying is that it is easier for us to actually ask Japan to pledge than it is for them to do that. So any collaborative thing we can do, I think we can go for it. Yeah, so I don't know what you think, Rachel, about that, but I see a good entry point for collaboration on this TCAD issue.
Maybe like,
yeah.
All right, okay. Thank you for that to you both, Rachel and Rosemary. But just to add as well, on the side of Women for Global Fund, so part of our processes and engagements, for an example, through the media training that we will be having on the 23rd, 24th, and 26th, is also to just draw from like the women and collaborators. So Nana and colleagues also like online and others who are not here today, if you can just feel free to join them, because that's where we'll also just be looking to hear more in terms of like how to basically phrase or some of the key points that should be raised in some of the letters. So we are also facilitating a process of writing some of the letters, but it's something that would have to engage and work closely with GFAN, as Rosemary has already mentioned that, you know, like there are already existing templates, so there's no need to duplicate, but just to make sure that we have like, you know, messages amplified. Sophie, would you like to add to that?
Thanks, Fezile. Yeah, I think I obviously support what you say. And then Nana, just to say that, you know, we will be discussing this more with all of you from our network. So we sent a letter off to Sweden this morning. And obviously we'll be discussing closely with GFAN folks so that we don't duplicate efforts. And you know, if there is a big sign-on going, then we won't do a big sign-on. But so to Sweden, for example, we've done an individual letter. Whereas I think there's also going to be a big sign-on that goes to Sweden in addition to the one that we've sent. So there's a bit of a coordinated effort. And we will have templates, Nana, that we can then decide if you want to send those directly to the embassies in your countries. But I think you know, it goes without saying that it's a coordinated effort, and we shouldn't be doing things without discussing with Rachel and Rosemary and Quentin around what's being sent when, so that we are, you know, we're all making noise and affirming each other's messages. So thanks.
Right, thank you, Sophie. I see Ndolo, there's a question again on chat. Would you like to just take us through that? And then
the question is from Boazo. He says, I'm sorry if it's a he or she, I'm not sure. Thank you to the Global Fund for taking into account the key populations for the cause of HIV. And his question is, why does the Global Fund not take care of malaria among the key population when it's devastating?
Thanks for that, Ndolo, and for the question. Maybe Claudia, are you still online? Would you like to take that one? But also colleagues like Rachel, Quentin, and Rosemary, also feel free to also respond.
I think she will see you after lunch here.
Please mute. Claudia, are you there to take it?
Thank you, Fezile. So on malaria, there's a dedicated malaria team within the Global Fund, which I'm happy to connect you with if you want to have a deeper discussion. Key populations are amongst the priority groups throughout the Global Fund, including the malaria team. And then if you look at the new strategy, there are greater ambitions here and commitments around making sure that key populations are included both in leadership and then also as beneficiaries as we move forward. but I've included my email in the chat. So if you want to have a discussion with the malaria team of the Global Fund, just drop me a line and I can connect you. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Claudia. I don't see any other hands either from Rosemary, Rachel, or Quentin, so I'm sure that covers it. Colleagues, we are like on top of the hour, 30 minutes later than we had anticipated, but thank you so much for your patience. I'd like to now hand over to my colleague Sophie for some closing remarks. Sophie?
Thanks, Fezile. I really just wanted to thank Fezile for facilitating today, and to thank Claudia, Quentin, Rachel, and Rosemary, and all of you who have joined. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom with us, and having this discussion. As was said today, I think twice, the world has changed, and we're still trying to figure out what that means for us and for the Global Fund. And we're living in these unprecedented times and trying to raise money at the same time. And the Global Fund, is entering its third decade and preparing for this next funding cycle. And the gaps and the weaknesses related to gender and HIV, TB, and malaria are major challenges. And we're engaging with this because we all need a fully funded Global Fund. And as the speakers have said today, this strategy is really ambitious, and it's the best we've seen so far to be able to articulate what needs to be done to reduce gender inequalities that heighten and sustain vulnerability to the 3 diseases. So without this funding, we know that what will happen is the non-biomedical stuff will get cut. And that's why we all need to be part of making sure that the Global Fund is fully funded. So just so grateful to be connected to all the GFAN folks who have historically and are doing an incredible job to help the Global Fund raise more money. And we're excited to be bringing the voices of young women to that discussion, and going into our media training next week to create some products to be able to share to raise awareness. So thank you so much, everyone, and the Global Fund, and everybody for joining. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Sophie, for that. Like, I've seen a last comment on chat, but I think the same kind of response that Claudia had given could apply. So feel free to just reach out to her. But like, as we're saying, the conversation and the discussions around the replenishment are continuing, colleagues. So just to also give a chance to our speakers for just some takeaway points, quick closing remarks. Maybe we can start with you, Rosemary, followed by Rachel, Quentin, and then Claudia.
Just to say many thanks for organizing this. It's great to see a gathering of women advocates coming together to champion the Global Fund cause. It's really great to be among you all. Thanks for the invitation to participate.
Thanks, everybody. And it's quite exciting because I see that people are still trying to come into the waiting room, even though the call is almost over. So it's amazing to see how much solidarity there is amongst our colleagues around this. But I suppose one of the key things that I would want to add is the fact that even as women, we're not only women activists, because as part of key populations, you're also not just key population activists, because we're part of the whole. So we, many of us can be daughters, mothers, sisters, cousins, etc. So we have a whole variety of issues that we do bring to the table, that we don't necessarily only represent one issue specifically. So just to just to add on to some of the questions that were raised, I think it's really important to note that there are efforts ongoing to ensure that grassroots organizations are also involved in some of the implementation work, and that there is a strong push to ensure that dual track financing takes place in local organizations at the country level. So I won't burden everybody with great details, but thank you so much for attending this really, really important call. And thank you so much, Wim, for Global Fund for hosting this call. Thank you.
Thanks, Quentin.
Thanks a lot. No, thanks to all the participants. It's a bit hard to follow really good closing remarks by Rachel, so I'll be short. I'm just popping my email into the chat. I welcome anyone, of course, to reach out. I know the work we do at the Global Fund Secretariat, the Global Fund Advocate Network Secretariat can be a bit remote and isn't as focused on country work. But we have a lot of useful resources if you want to be more involved and understand better what the Global Fund does and how you can, as civil society, be engaged. So really don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Quentin. Claudia?
Okay, so I know this webinar is finishing, but we're really going to continue this conversation. So I've dropped in my email for all of you. I'm going to be with many of you at some of the sessions of the media training next week. And then if anyone is not already connected to the community rights and gender regional platforms of the Global Fund, again, let me know, I'll add you there. It's a really great way to get ongoing information, not only around the replenishment, but ongoing Global Fund work and then emerging opportunities. So thank you, and a big thank you to the Women for Global Fund team for organizing this space.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, everyone. And Sophie has also, again, just shared the link for more information on the next coming events. Like Claudia mentioned, we have another webinar on the 14th of June and the 16th of August. But then soon before that, the media trainings, 23rd, 24th, and 26th, you can just click on the link for more information. And just to say goodbye, those who can, if you can just switch on your videos and then wave goodbye, and that will be the end of our webinar, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.